My name is Owen Symes, and welcome to The Copagandists, a podcast about cop shows and the people who make them. This time, we'll be analyzing Highway Patrol as a piece of art, as a commodity, and as a political object. We'll start with the artistic side, looking briefly at how the show influenced the medium of television itself, and also its storytelling quality. Then we'll judge its commercial performance, its ratings, its syndication, its product tie-ins, all that fun stuff. Finally, we'll spend the lion's share of our time analyzing the show's politics, both its relationship to actual political issues germane to 1950s California, and the show's ideological messaging. Let's get going. The first thing to note about the show's artistic quality is the frankly lukewarm critical reception it received while still on the air. As we saw in the last episode, many critics dismissed it as basically just a clone of Dragnet, and a pretty simplistic one at that. One of the first to push back against this critique of unoriginality was Frederick Ziv himself. He considered Highway Patrol to be his favorite program and asserted in 1974 that it actually pioneered a new kind of TV editing. The star of the show was Broderick Crawford, who moved so fast that we edited our film accordingly. Today we hear about quick cuts, but quick cutting technique really was first put into television film in Highway Patrol. And if you look at previous television film, you'll find that it's not cut the way Highway Patrol is cut. It started a whole new trend. Now, Ziv exaggerated here. If anything, Dragnet was the major pioneer of the quick edit, as well as the extreme close-up on US television. Nevertheless, Highway Patrol did imitate Webb's techniques quite well, with its editing standing out as a major high point of the production. And just because Ziv exaggerated one innovation doesn't mean that Highway Patrol didn't innovate at all. Indeed, the show pioneered the helicopter shot, something that we take for granted today, but that was quite new in 1955. It is fair to say, however, that Highway Patrol is not, and really was never meant to be, quality television. Yet this lower baseline quality contrasts noticeably with the interest that many viewers have maintained for the show in the years since its cancellation. For this paradox, we can return, ironically, to those negative 1950s critics who dismissed the show as too action-oriented, too violent, or too simplistic. These characteristics might not have impressed many adults at the time, but they worked wonders on myriads of children in the US and abroad. Those kids, in turn, took their adoration for Crawford and his adventures into adulthood, lending the show another life in the most coveted syndication market of them all. Nostalgia. That's no small accomplishment.
Did you say hit and run?
Highway 12 in the Canyon Bridge.
When?
About 20 minutes ago. Beat cars are on the way.
Tell them to disregard. Dorsey, get everything I need in the car. Scrapers, tweezers, camera, film, plaster the works. Don't miss a thing. Come on, hurry it up.
All right.
Anybody see the accident?
Man by the name of Dilling is at the scene, but he didn't see the car.
Well, that figures. Hurry it up, Dorsey, will you?
I've got it all.
All right, let's go.
Speaking of markets, let's move on and talk about money. Whatever we might detract from Highway Patrol in terms of artistic merit, admittedly a subjective endeavor, the show was objectively a commercial success. Because it was syndicated and played at various times and places across the country, it never achieved consistent placement in the national ratings charts. Nevertheless, as we have seen, its local premiere beat out everything except I Love Lucy in that market. Add to that the fact that Ziv wanted to keep making the show even after 4 seasons, only to be turned down by his restless star. We get a sense that Ziv certainly perceived the show to be profitable. And the money didn't stop flowing when production ceased. Syndication was all the rage and allowed Highway Patrol to keep on motorcycling across the country as stations paid to re-air the existing stock of episodes, sometimes under different titles like 10-4. This was a pretty new development in the mid to late 1950s. People were only just starting to realize that syndication was a real moneymaker, that people wanted to watch these shows again and again and again, even if they weren't the newest thing. These episodes ran well into the 1970s and reached beyond national borders, too. The show was translated into 17 languages across 71 countries and proved especially popular in Argentina, Germany, Italy, Japan, Portugal, Spain, and the United Kingdom. The show capitalized on this broadcasting success by merchandising a series of toys based around the panoply of police equipment, actually kind of like Dragnet. Most popularly, the gyro siren car, with which the officers pursued their prey. Crawford actually joked about this to an interviewer at the time. When asked if this adult-oriented show was popular with children, the actor exclaimed, "Yes, it's all the rage with them. They've got highway patrol cars with whining sirens, highway patrol hats, highway patrol games, the lot." No doubt these toys helped cement the show's legacy in the minds of many an impressionable baby boomer. In addition to its success while in production and in syndication, Highway Patrol continued the network cycle of see show, copy show. Highway Patrol, remember, had been spawned from Dragnet, and likewise did news shows come out of Highway Patrol's success, especially State Trooper, and the United States Border Patrol.
Jagger, Don Jagger, Deputy Chief of Operations, United States Border Patrol.
United States Border Patrol. Filmed on location in cooperation with the Immigration and Naturalization Service, United States Department of Justice, and starring Richard Webb. The United States Border Patrol is the only federal law enforcement body whose operations include the air, the sea, and the land along the four borders of our country, whose men are the best trained in the world, and whose primary mission is to secure the borders against all persons and things illegal, and among whose members is the fastest gun alive.
These shows didn't last, however, owing to a growing malaise among the viewing public with police procedurals on the one hand, but more importantly, to a mounting political backlash against TV violence that hit cop shows very hard.
Over 1 million cars in the state, 250,000 in the county, and half of them driven by women. Any one of them could have done it. That's not counting out-of-state cars. Matthews. Oh, hello, Wilson. The man talk yet? Well, shoot everything down here, will you? All right, thanks.
Critical?
We'll know in a little while.
They type his blood?
I was left of it, O positive.
That was the same as you brought back on that piece of telegraph pole. It'll be on the car, too.
If we find the car.
We'll save discussion about the TV violence issue for another time. It's a whole lot to talk about, and instead turn to the politics of Highway Patrol itself. In 1955, California Highway Patrol Commissioner Bernard Caldwell told his press office to get him a show like Dragnet. Yet only 1 year earlier, he had rejected Patrol Officer George Heckenkamp's pitch for a show based on internal patrol files. What changed? The extant historical record, such that I can unearth, doesn't give a direct answer from either the commissioner or his department, but enough evidence exists that we can read between the lines a little bit. And the answer begins by noting one particular issue galvanizing California politics in the 1950s: traffic fatalities. This problem had been growing in the public imagination since the end of World War II and the subsequent boom in car culture across the country. Here's a Ford Motor Company propaganda film from the era to give you an idea of the vibes.
I am Henry Ford II. In recent years, there has been a lot of talk about our highway situation. So much has been said that I feel sure a great many of you must have wondered, as I did, whether there was anything a private citizen could do about a problem so big. That's why we decided to study the situation. The results are published in this book. We call it Freedom of the American Road, simply because we Americans always have liked plenty of elbow room, freedom to come and go as we please in this big country of ours. The first thing we found was that you can't talk about highways without talking about traffic and safe driving too. We found that there are many experienced highway and traffic safety experts who are doing a great service to the public. What they need is public understanding and support. But the most important thing we discovered was that already many private citizens in states and communities across the nation have gotten together to tackle their local problems with real success. We present a few of their stories in this motion picture. We do so with pride, for here, it seems to me, is real democracy in action.
California was especially hard hit by the rise in traffic deaths. By Christmas of 1956, some 3,720 road fatalities had been recorded in the state, beating out the previous record set a decade earlier, and the year wasn't even over. Many Californians demanded action. In September of 1955, in the wake of a pretty deadly Labor Day weekend, California Governor Goodwin Knight, a name that I am not making up, pledged to explore everything to cut down on the road deaths. Highway Commissioner Caldwell went to work making the case to the public that the problem was primarily one of law and enforcement. It wasn't about the way roads were constructed. It wasn't about the way cars were made. It wasn't about the over-reliance on private transportation and an under-reliance on public transportation with professional drivers trained to do a job. This was about people breaking the law and the inevitable carnage that resulted. He went on the offensive, first blaming high speed as, quote, the greatest contributing factor to the crisis. A couple of months later, in February of '56, he expanded this thesis, citing 3 major violations that accounted for the majority of crashes: excessive speed, right-of-way violations, and drunk driving. He said at the time that, quote, over half of our fatal and injury accidents were caused by one of these 3 violations. The next month, he went even further, declaring that of the 484 traffic deaths recorded so far in that year, 90%, quote, died because someone violated a traffic law. To solve this crisis of illegality and thus tackle the carnage on the streets, Caldwell not only advocated for the broadening of law enforcement power, like with the use of radar, but lobbied for his own department to get more money. This wasn't just about cracking down on highway criminality, this was about making sure that his cops were the ones doing the cracking. And this was not a foregone conclusion, not only because back then the California State Police and the California Highway Patrol were 2 separate entities, but because in the context of the traffic crisis, a growing number of voices were calling for other institutions, either other police departments or even the California National Guard, to help enforce the state's traffic laws. People were really grasping at anything to get this under control. Anything that is except better public transportation so people didn't have to drive. In October 1955, the very month that Highway Patrol premiered, the commissioner asked California's government for a drastic increase in his department's budget. His proposal for 1956 to 57 included an increase of 1,168 uniformed employees, 915 patrol officers, 208 sergeants, 45 lieutenants, and 102 other employees. This was a nearly 50% increase from his current complement of 2,526. I don't know if you can hear that loud car in the background. If only that was a train. He said at the time, quote, we want to bring patrol up to where it ought to be. We've been slipping every year in proportion to the state's population growth, and overcrowded highways. Now, Caldwell soon tempered this proposal down to 270 new patrol officers, although he claimed his rationale for this reduction was not because of pushback regarding cost, but rather because his department simply could not train 915 new officers. In this way, he both brought his proposal down to a more politically realistic figure, while also reiterating the utter lack of resources that he had to work with. He basically told the state government, I want more cops, but even if you give them to me, my resources are so threadbare at this point, I wouldn't be able to train all the new recruits. It was a pragmatic condemnation. Now, for anyone who cried that this budget increase would be too costly to the taxpayer, Commissioner Caldwell defended his proposal as the most efficient way to protect the state's drivers. He told the press that even at its currently insufficient strength, his department protected Californians at the cost of only $1.42 per citizen. He quipped, "That's pretty cheap insurance to keep down accidents." While this budget made its way through California's state legislature, Caldwell continued to push enforcement as the best solution to the problem, saying in a January 1956 interview, "I want to use just about any damn thing we have to cut down on traffic deaths." And for him, this included lobbying for a blanket 65-mile-an-hour speed limit across all of California, for radar-assisted speed enforcement equipment, and obviously for more troopers. He advocated for the new speed limit in particular, both because, in his view, Californians didn't understand the current law, and because, quote, it'll make enforcement easier. Just for context, the law then in force was a 55-mile-an-hour maximum unless conditions permitted faster travel. So if you could reasonably say you could drive faster, you were allowed to. Obviously, this gave a lot of leeway for drivers and a lot of confusion for police, so there was a lot of argument at the time about whether tickets were even valid and that kind of thing. In May 1956, a newspaper summarized remarks Caldwell gave to an audience of fellow cops. He asserted that drivers generally lacked the skill to react appropriately at high speeds, that cars were simply too powerful, and that, unfortunately, the young were increasingly the victims of this highway slaughter. He then turned to his solution. To quote the newspaper, "Admitting cars are nearly indispensable to today's families, Caldwell said, however, highway patrol strength is far below what is necessary for controlling the hundreds of thousands of autos. He declared the patrol was organized under strength and never has caught up. Without sufficient courtesy in driving and without enough enforcement to demand it, Caldwell pointed out many of the state's motoring families will be visited by tragedy." Another paper excerpted a direct line from Caldwell's speech, quote, "Enforcement is the only way motorists can be impressed with the danger of speed and other important traffic violations." Caldwell also had his team issue bulletins to local newspapers. These were described in a letter to the editor that he wrote as, quote, "an extensive and continuing enforcement and accident prevention information program through the newspapers. We are attempting to issue an apropos release each week, with other special information releases from time to time." In one example of these periodic bulletins, Caldwell warned motorists about the dangers of high beams. Quote, "If you meet someone who does not lower the beam, do not use your high beam in retaliation. This only adds to the danger by causing both to be blinded at the same time." Highway Patrol also organized PR events within its own walls. For instance, in April 1956, California Highway Patrol invited Californians to take a gander inside one of its new patrol facilities. A headline from the time promised, quote, "Helicopter, heavy trucks, driver test methods, intoxometers among exhibits." In this instance, about 7,500 people, including 2,500 children, attended this tour. The television show Highway Patrol was, therefore, just one of several ways that Caldwell sought to reach and influence the public. Now that we've politicized the show and its context, let's drill down and focus on how this portion of Caldwell's propaganda, how his television fiction, pushed a certain view of how the police worked.
Ellen Barton's flight from the farm to her husband was being dogged by a heavy weight of guilty conscience, slowing down her car, plunging her deeper and deeper into emotional imbalance.
A primary way that Highway Patrol sought to gain audience trust and therefore influence how viewers thought of the police was through authenticity. It took some time, however, for the TV show's producers to work out the kinks and present their story as authentically as the police actually wanted. According to the California Highway Patrol's official history of the show's production, written by Officer Sam Knight in 1992, ID 11153, the first few episodes of the show did not meet with Commissioner Caldwell's expectations regarding authenticity. Apparently, a non-uniformed person had been providing technical advice to the production, and he'd had no practical experience as a police officer. It's also possible that Caldwell resented that these first few episodes were such a rush job on the part of Ziv Productions, but that's not specified anywhere. Caldwell promptly met with star Broderick Crawford and brought on Patrol Officer Frank Runyon, ID 475, demanding that the show employ Runyon as the technical advisor going forward. Caldwell admonished the pair, "If California Highway Patrol is going to support this thing, it's going to be technically correct. Whatever Officer Runyon says, that's what goes." The official account of the show's production gives a couple of instances of Officer Runyon ensuring authenticity. Among his responsibilities, he had to read and approve every script. And this authenticity was, quote, meticulously scrutinized, even down to the radio codes used. Typically, a dispatcher would use real codes, such as 1179 and 104 in the course of the program. The show worked towards authenticity in other ways as well. One of the producers, Jack Hertzberg, who worked on the show in its latter couple of seasons, actually accompanied CHP officers on patrol. The department also lent the production use of its patrol cars for the first season, the 1955 Buick Century two-door sedan, not available for civilian purchase. After the first season, however, Ziv Productions had to procure a couple of cars for its own use. To lend authenticity to the sound and Foley work, Officer Runyon also recorded all of the siren sounds himself, so every siren you hear in the show is apparently genuine. One piece of inauthenticity was deliberately fostered by Officer Runyon, however. Crawford's character, Chief Matthews, never wore a distinctive uniform that would have identified him specifically with the California Highway Patrol. This was because, according to the official account, he was intended to represent the head of any state highway patrol, not just California's. So this was a show that was trying to make not just the CHP look good, but professional cops in general. In addition to these efforts at authenticity on set, the producers promulgated a document entitled General Information for Writers on Highway Patrol, which outlined the rules that show's writers were supposed to follow. These included everything from the very, very general, what kind of show was being written, to the extremely specific, how characters were to order food or handle cigarettes. Some of the most interesting stipulations included, number 1, this is basically an action documentary series. We take great care not to imitate any of the other well-known police, detective, sheriff, or district attorney type shows that are on the air. Number 2, our crooks are clever, or the problem insurmountable, and Chief Matthews solves it. We do not like to have criminals caught or the crime solved because thieves fall out. It must be solved by Matthews thinking and using good police work. Chief Matthews has no personal life, so we don't talk about wives, children, girlfriends, nor does he at any time have any personal relationships with any of the characters. This does not mean, however, that he cannot know his officers and their families. It's very important that he is not written tough. He can fight and enter gunplay. He walks very well, and we prefer not to have him run unless absolutely necessary. He should never be brought into anything that would be out of his jurisdiction, such as investigating a pickpocket, etc. Number 4, subsection B, smoking. Our people can smoke, but we cannot identify the cigarette either by package or length of the cigarette. If a cigarette is offered, it must be taken. A cigarette cannot be stamped out as a dramatic piece of business. Subsection C, kidnapping. We cannot do kidnapping stories unless the person kidnapped is obviously an adult. Subsection F, juvenile delinquents. They are forbidden. Any delinquent must be an obvious adult. 11. Violence. We want violence and impact, but we try to stay away from unnecessary violence and wanton killing, unless this is a story point. 12. Authenticity. We try at all times for complete authenticity. You should be cautioned that the technical advisor's word is law. Don't count on a dramatic license, which he may not understand. 14. In the matter of portraying the patrol, our men are all very smart and efficient. They are polite at all times and do not push people around unless the situation calls for it.
I've taken all the conniving I'm going to take in this case. Your wife is guilty of a hit-and-run felony, and you're just as guilty by hiding her.
I tell you, it was her mother who did it.
I just left the tool farm. Her father told me the truth. Now, where is she?
Oh.
I don't get it. 4 law-abiding citizens. One of you has an auto accident, leaves the victim in the street, bleeding his life away. A little while later, the husband, the mother, and the father joined in the crime by trying to conceal the criminal. What, have you gone temporarily insane, or what?
I guess we have. It's all that mother of hers.
You're over 21. Where is she?
Now that we've discussed how the show attempted to achieve a sense of authenticity, now we can discuss how this portrayal contrasted and compared to reality. The result of all this cooperating with the police was a show that focused on pursuit, the crimes that made it necessary, the technology that made it possible, and the professionals that refused to relent until the job was done. Modern cars, aircraft, and wireless communications equipment made up the primary marvels of police technology presented on the show. Indeed, a majority of the dialogue occurs either in a car or over a radio. Officers used in-car radios to maintain contact with each other, blanketing the airwaves with the procedures of interdiction and nudging the audience to conceive of the police as an organized, coherent, efficient agent of state power. In this way, the show can trace roots back to the radio crime dramas of the 1930s, the precursors of Dragnet, especially Calling All Cars.
Calling All Cars, a copyrighted program transcribed and dedicated to the prevention of crime. Calling all cars, attention all cars, broadcast 4. Proceed at once to Central Police Station. There's a man in the chief's office threatening to blow up the building. That is all. Gordon.
These radio dramas hammered home what's come to be called the dragnet effect. That idea that apprehension by law enforcement is an inevitability. These radio shows referenced technologies like the car and the radio, collapsing both space and time into a thin blue line of inevitability. Highway Patrol's visual focus on cars and helicopters and its audio emphasis on constant radio chatter on telephones and network teleprinters continued this tradition. The focus on police communication technology combined with editing techniques like rapid cuts to create a sense of urgency. The cops needed to act now to stop the bad guys. Happily, the cars and helicopters and radios all reinforced to the audience the speed and efficacy of modern police methods. The world had many emergencies, and these officers were up to the task. This emphasis on pursuit presented the working day of the typical highway patrol officer as wall-to-wall action, and an analysis of the IMDb plot summaries proves this to be the case. Among the show's 156 episodes, 38.5% focused on robbery burglary, 26.3% on murder, 12.8% on escaped convicts, 7.7% on kidnappings and disappearances. Only 5.1% of episodes focused on car accidents or traffic incidents. A July 1959 article in Men's Only magazine entitled California Highway Patrol as It Really Is spent several pages giving readers some of the more grisly details such pursuits could include. After doing so, however, the article quotes an unnamed patrol officer and his low opinion of the show. Quote, "That show has nothing to do with the patrol. They dream up incidents each week to fill half an hour, and they take considerable dramatic license." Don't be fooled, however. This did not mean that the show was adding too much drama to the patrol officer's life. Quite the opposite, in fact, because the article's author concludes, in fact, the true stories of the patrol are usually more dramatic than those presented by actors, playing at cops and robbers on TV. Now, that unnamed CHP officer was right to dismiss Highway Patrol as inaccurate, precisely because it was too dramatic. A 1957 report by the California State Treasurer included actual data provided by CHP that broke down the various types of duty and percent of total enforcement for the year 1955. This data indicates that officers spent only 66.3% of their time on actual patrol. It doesn't break down what this entailed, how much of it was pursuit, how much of it was lying in wait, how much of it was investigating anything on the scene, but only 66% of their time was on patrol, and surely not all of that was spent in hot pursuit. Contrast that with the fact that they spent fully 17% of their time on far more mundane activities like crash investigation, 8.8%, and administrative work, 4.6% in the office and 4.2% in the field. This report actually admonishes the department to maybe increase their efficiencies in other aspects of the job so they could actually spend more time on patrol. And we can compare this 1950s report to some testimony from a current CHP officer who is describing the job in a recruitment bid on local California news.
People wonder what an average day looks like. Obviously, this is part of your day coming to speak to us, but especially for a newbie, what are they doing out there?
So first and foremost, you're out there making sure that the motoring public is safe, right? Mm-hmm. You're leaving that office in the morning with your beat assignment. You're going out there and you're looking for traffic violations. You're looking to assist people that are on the right shoulder, or help any way you can. And you name it, with the Highway Patrol is ever evolving. So you're going to see a lot more state police type activities from the Highway Patrol. So you're going to be involved in, solving some major crimes, things that happen on the freeway or any of the state buildings out there.
Okay, Jim. But I wouldn't kill anybody.
Then why are you doing this?
This is my own life.
No, it isn't. It belongs to your mother and your father and your husband. Remember, God giveth, and God taketh away.
Having contextualized Highway Patrol as part of a broader effort on the part of Caldwell and his department to push a certain narrative of how the police functioned and the kinds of problems that California's roads were facing, what can we conclude? Well, first, the historical record does not definitively indicate that Caldwell's declarations, his public outreach, and his television show were all part of any master plan set in motion at some particular point in time. I think, however, that it strains credulity to assert as coincidence the fact that he engaged so aggressively across a variety of means and media at the same time that he sought such massive increases in his share of the state budget. Even if this propaganda campaign developed piecemeal, by the end of the decade, this had evolved into a multi-pronged effort to direct public thought in a certain direction. Which begs the question, did it work? Well, judging the effect of any particular piece of propaganda is actually really difficult. People are often happy to record for posterity what they believe. Rarely do they bother to consider how those beliefs came to reside within their minds. What we can say is that the public does seem to have come to think of the traffic problem in the terms set by the police. We can see this evidenced first by the preference of newspaper editorials at the time, which overwhelmingly supported Caldwell's understanding of the traffic crisis and its solution: security through strength. Advocating for the removal of California's prohibition on speed traps, one paper asserted in September of '55, "Americans don't like traps, either human or mechanical, but even less does the sensible citizen like the kind of carnage strewn over the roads by reckless driving during the last holiday." Another paper editorialized, Our antiquated enforcement rules had justification at the time they were passed, but today, considering the slaughter, almost any action, no matter how harsh, is reasonable if it will prevent some of the highway carnage. This same paper concluded in favor of, frankly, draconian methods. We believe with Commissioner Caldwell that a fixed speed, strictly enforced, will prevent accidents and aid in the apprehension of violators. And, until they quit killing our neighbors and friends, we don't care too much how the more persistent and frequent violators are caught. A third editorial, syndicated across a number of California papers in March of '56, quoted Caldwell himself blaming traffic violations for the vast majority of fatalities, and then concluded, quote, "Maybe the school of thought which holds that accident control lies best in the hands of a fully manned highway patrol, patrolmen enough to do the job right everywhere and at all times, has the best remedy yet devised. And maybe the speed cop you last growled about because the sight of him slowed you down did you the best favor of your life." In fact, I could find only one editorial that openly questioned Caldwell's assertions. Capitol News Service columnist Henry MacArthur, in a syndicated essay, noted that while Caldwell focused on speed as a primary component of the problem, more than half of accidents actually occurred under 40 miles an hour. He also asserted that it was the cops and not the motorists who did not understand California's speeding laws. Yet even here, MacArthur accepted law enforcement as the necessary solution. Rather than speed limits and radar, he recommended more restrictive licensing of persons to drive. And of course, this would be enforced by the police. So it's cops all the way down. Another piece of evidence that Caldwell's campaign bore fruit is the widespread adoption of his rhetoric by many political leaders, civic bodies, and private institutions. I'll only burden you with a few examples. One California politician, a legislator, declared in early 1955, "We must do something to stop this slaughter on our highways. In my book, speeding is one of the worst causes of traffic accidents, and I think the use of radar will materially decrease speeding." Over the 1955 Labor Day weekend, a coalition of the governor's office, various police departments, municipal governments, and insurance companies combined their resources in promulgating a massive Speed Kills campaign across the state. The next year, the California Federation of Women's Clubs came out in favor of budget increases to augment the number of CHP personnel. The district president, L.E. Willard, told the press, "California had 6,731,656 registered vehicles, plus 2,424,000 out-of-state vehicles on the highways in 1955. This number cannot be adequately supervised by the Highway Patrol, which averages only 350 men on duty at a time." On the policy level, Caldwell also won via the widespread adoption of radar and other speed enforcement technology and techniques, like unmarked patrol cars. This occurred piecemeal because while California's state law prohibited the use of speed traps, it was initially unclear if this included radar as well. Most of the important police officials in the state, including Chief Parker of the LAPD and Commissioner Caldwell of the CHP, preferred to get the law changed at the state level before updating their policies to include the use of radar in their departments. But this did not stop a number of local cops from using the technology. While the lobbying effort to get the speed trap provision overturned ultimately failed, in fact, California Vehicle Code subsection 40801 VC still prohibits the use of a speed trap by the police, in the long run that actually didn't matter because California courts ultimately ruled that radar technology did not constitute a speed trap in the legal sense. So they were adopted en masse. Most importantly of all, Caldwell got more money. His tempered 1956 budget proposal was eventually accepted by the legislative subcommittee, recommended to Ways and Means, and then incorporated into the state's budget. He followed it up the next year with a request for another 404 new officers and more funds for radar equipment, although a row between him and some influential senators reduced the number of officers added to the force in that particular year. Now, Caldwell resigned in 1959. A new governor ushered in a new commissioner, but his legacy of bureaucratic success has continued into the 21st century. Under his successor, Brad Crittenden, the department doubled in size and kept on increasing. From 2,500 personnel in 1955, CHP employed 8,774 by the end of the 1980s and nearly 11,000 by 2019. Now, I can hear today's Bernard Caldwells jumping to argue that this increase did not necessarily keep pace with California's population. So to put these numbers in perspective, we can calculate the number of patrol personnel per 100,000 Californians. In 1955, it was 19 patrol per every 100,000 Californians. That rose to 30 in 1989 and then fell slightly to 28 in 2019. So over the course of the last half century, the proportion of patrol officers to Californians has almost doubled. After suffering some COVID-related staffing issues in the early 2020s, California's Democrats have since begun the CHP 1000 initiative that seeks to add 1,000 new recruits to the Highway Patrol roster. And I'll let a recent local news interview with a CHP media relations officer make the case for why that's necessary.
Okay, let's start with this. So right now, is there a need for more officers? Do we need to recruit folks?
There is always a need for more officers, right? As we try to keep up with the retirements and people leaving the agency, we're always trying to backfill those positions. So anybody interested in joining the CHP, we are ready to take you.
You know, a lot of people just on their mind say, well, okay, how much does it pay, Jim? What's the range here for a CHP officer?
I think people will be a little bit surprised, but starting salary for a California Highway Patrol officer is $122,500 a year right out of the academy. So obviously, you're going to make a big sacrifice to get there, but once you do get there, I think it's a very well-paying job that's going to come with a lot of benefits.
Mm-hmm.
Again, there's only a correlation between public sentiment and state policy on the one hand, and the PR campaign inaugurated by Caldwell on the other. Cause cannot be definitively established. But Highway Patrol seems particularly significant to me here, not only because it achieved considerable ratings success when it first aired, but because it sustained itself in the imagination of an untold number of baby boomer children, people who would grow up to make political decisions with Crawford's gravelly voice booming in the deepest recesses of their brain matter. Moreover, a number of cops certainly thought that the good PR, especially from Highway Patrol, did make a difference. Officer Frank Runyon, who remember was the technical advisor on the show, said decades later, "Brad Crawford put the California Highway Patrol on the map. He did nothing but good for us." And in the opinion of the official CHP history of the show, quote, "Broderick Crawford loved the CHP and was personally responsible for many facets of the positive and professional image the department enjoys today. During the late 50s and for much of the 1960s, Crawford promoted and embodied the public's idea that the CHP always gets their man. And for such a legacy, Broderick Crawford has earned and shall forever deserve the CHP's respect." So whether or not Caldwell's PR campaign had a decisive effect on public opinion, and whether or not Highway Patrol played a pivotal role in that campaign, the police certainly deemed it a good return on investment. This concludes our detour down the asphalt precincts of Highway Patrol. Next time, we'll return to Dragnet to discuss, in a similar fashion, that show's relationship to the Los Angeles of its time, its politics, its LAPD, and its chief, William Parker. Thanks for listening to this week's episode covering the legacy of Highway Patrol. Sources are in the show notes. You can find an essay version of this script complete with detailed citations on my Substack at Owen Symes. You can also find me on Blue Sky, Owen-Symes, and YouTube at Integral History. Finally, check out my book, He Was Our Man in Washington, A History of the Obama Years. Music by Carl Casey at White Bat Audio. See you next time.
Highway Patrol in action again next week. Until then, remember, leave blood at the Red Cross, not on the highway. This is Bradley Crawford saying see you next week.